felonies for the conspiracy alleged to overturn the 2020 election results. He has said publicly that he would fire the special counsel in that case, Jack Smith, within seconds after taking an oath of office in January. So to put it mildly, that case is in a pretty fragile state. There's no trial or high-profile hearing between now and January 20th in that case. Trump is also among the January 6th defendant overall population. There are 1,500 people charged with the riot at the U.S. Capitol with an effort to overturn the 2020 election. And Donald Trump has never answered either of these two questions point blank. Would he pardon all 1,500 plus of those defendants? He has promised pardons, but never said if it's for everybody or just for some. Nor has he said if he would have his Justice Department shut down these prosecutions. There are still hundreds of these defendants who have yet to have a plea agreement hearing or yet to go to trial. There are new arrests that have occurred in just the past few days. There were people in court on Tuesday. There are more scheduled for court today in connection with January 6th. The prospect of those defendants going to trial may have just diminished through the course of the past 24 hours. What's more, the outlook for those who've been in prison, and 600 plus have served some time or are serving time right now, may have changed over the course of this evening.
All right. Scott McFarland, thank you. Want to go quickly to Major Garrett at the data desk for those remaining battleground states and an update. Major?
Yes. Let's talk about Wisconsin, Nora. So, Wisconsin, 10 electoral votes. We have leaned Trump. Others have called this, why haven't we? Well, there is a segment of vote that is still outstanding. We expect it to be reported within the next 10 to 15 minutes that will give us what we believe at the data desk will be absolute clarity. But I can tell you this. Here's the model right now. Donald Trump's range in Wisconsin, Kamala Harris's range in Wisconsin. That does not look promising, for her, to put it mildly. To make it even more clear visually, 71% of the outstanding vote, we project she will get 54% of it. We are just waiting for that last bank of voters to be absolutely perfectly sure about Wisconsin before we give that to Trump at the data desk. But I just want to have the audience take a look at Wisconsin as compared to 2020. Look at the map. This is 2024. When I press this button, 2020 president, you are not going to see a huge coloration difference except the shading. Watch the shading. Red areas get a little redder. Blue areas get slightly less blue. What does that mean? That means the intensity of the Trump vote became more apparent, and Harris underperformed as compared to Joe Biden. Again, here's 2024. Here's where we are early this morning. Here's where we were 4 years ago. And that is very evident in places like Milwaukee. You can see that the vice president trailing Joe Biden in Milwaukee, a hugely important part of any Democratic victory in Wisconsin. Running behind in Dane County, that's Madison. Every county around Dane also trailing. And since we're talking about a remade Republican Party, let's go to Fond du Lac. Why do I have Fond du Lac up there? Ripon, Wisconsin is there, the modern home of the Republican Party. And Donald Trump overperforming what he did in 2020. So if it's a remade Republican Party and the Republican Party at least traces some of its roots to Ripon, Wisconsin, well, even in that county, Trump is doing better this time around than he did 4 years ago.
Major Garrett, thank you for that. And as we see, it has been a successful night for Donald Trump and the Republican Party, winning decisively in a number of these battleground states and the Senate, right, Ed?
Yes. Republicans leading in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Nevada's Senate races. The Nevada one especially notable because Sam Brown, the candidate there, taking on the incumbent Democrat Jackie Rosen, in recent days was not expected to do that, but is now appearing to. The House remains too close to call. It is likely it will end up evenly divided yet again. And we should also point out, we have not heard anything from any Democrat working on the Harris campaign or at the White House or anywhere else disputing what we're seeing tonight. Nobody has stopped this momentum that is clearly going. There's no question that this is happening. Democrats up and down the ballot understand that what is unfolding is legit. We have not heard from the Harris campaign whether she has made any call to the former president, the president-elect, presumed possibly soon, whether she plans to. We should also note there is nothing on the public schedule at the White House tomorrow for the president, but a national security briefing in the afternoon that now could include all sorts of urgent matters from around the world as allies check in tomorrow. But again, no one in the Democratic Party disputing what's going on tonight.
And it is 3 a.m. in the East, and a very big night for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Just to recap, it looks like he is headed towards re-election. The former president just spoke to reporters in Florida, declaring victory. His vice president calling it the greatest comeback in history. And in the race to 270 electoral votes and the race to the White House, Donald Trump has received 266 electoral votes. Kamala Harris, 216. You can see those white states. CBS News has not yet projected. Some of the states we are still awaiting final results from are Wisconsin. CBS News rates that battleground as lean Republican. Michigan, Arizona, Nevada are all toss-ups. And CBS News at this hour projects Kamala Harris will win the state of Minnesota, home to her running mate, Governor Tim Walz. CBS News also projects that Harris wins New Jersey. Several states voted on reproductive rights this election. Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan has an update on where we stand on those on the ballot in 10 states, right?
That's right, Nora. And we led the evening off talking about what a big bet this was for Democrats who believed this would also help drive up more voters to the polls than they would if it hadn't been there, perhaps underlining some concern about enthusiasm for who was at the top of the ticket. Well, at this point, when we're looking at the straight-up referendums, we're seeing in a number of these states, in Florida, a very high benchmark for passage. It failed there, the effort to expand and enshrine in the Constitution protection for access to abortion. So that means the current law stands. It will be restricted after 6 weeks, after 15 weeks if you were raped. You saw some other measures there in Colorado. Not surprising, it did pass. In New York State, there was a broad referendum on a number of issues, including putting in the Constitution the right to an abortion. That did pass. We have seen some lean yeses in the state of Missouri. That is significant because it is a significant policy change from what the existing law is there. Abortion is currently illegal in the state of Missouri. No exceptions for rape and incest. So this is a significant change. You see there, yes vote, nearly 52%. It will enshrine reproductive rights in the Constitution, and the General Assembly will then be able to regulate abortion after viability. Viability, of course, was the line that Roe versus Wade became defined by. We also seen in Arizona likely to pass, likely yes there in the state of Arizona. Not a huge change in terms of policy. Abortion has been legal and protected. But remember, we spent so much time talking about what happened in that state when there was a snapback to a Civil War era law. That has not been the law of the state for some time since then. But now we will see that it'll be in the Constitution, the right to abortion and limit a state's ability to interfere. They had a pretty high benchmark, 52%, but you can see there, nearly 63% of the vote.
So just to explain that if there were a national abortion ban passed at 15 weeks, what would that mean then in Arizona if they enshrined it to 24 weeks or viability?
The federal law would supersede the state. You could presume. However, the Republican ticket, the two candidates haven't been very clear on the campaign trail about what they actually want to do with this. J.D. Vance, before he was the vice presidential candidate, had said he would like to see a national federal minimum standard. 15 weeks was what Senator Lindsey Graham had put forward. Critics of that would have said that that was too restrictive. Their argument was it's actually permissive because it would protect access up to 15 weeks. The average abortion is performed in that window of time.
But recently, Donald Trump has just said, well, it's okay, just let the states figure it out.
Exactly, except for today, because he went into the ballot box and he cast a vote in Florida that said no to the ballot initiative, which means he voted for something that restricts abortion access after 6 weeks of time. Now, when he was asked by reporters, when he went to do that, and they asked him to explain the vote, he said, stop asking me about that, which has basically been the approach for the past few weeks. Stop asking me about that, because there was concern that it could hurt Republicans. But for Democrats, they had really hoped it would help them. And we just didn't see that in the way perhaps that the vice president calculated. She put that right front and center in this campaign, talking about it so much. And now you could, I'm sure, John, you could argue it another way, which is when you look at some of the exit polls, Harris voters did say that was at times their second most important issue, the first being the state of democracy.
Right, but it didn't drive their vote.
It didn't.
I mean, it didn't, you know, I'm still struck by her underperformance with women relative to events that you'd think under the traditional way of thinking about politics would help increase her vote with women, and given what Donald Trump has said and the way he has behaved, it's one of the stories. It's one of the stories of the evening.
Yeah, I'm also curious, Ed, about Arizona. Why is the Senate candidate in Arizona doing so well? And she is
Ruben
not?
Gallego started his campaign by reminding voters in Arizona he's a Marine veteran.
Because he was running against Kari Lake.
And well, but first he was running against Kirsten Sinema, and he was able to demonstrate pretty quickly as he launched his campaign that Sinema had no hope of running. So then Kari Lake jumped in, big election denier, someone who had tried unsuccessfully to align herself with Trump. He kind of held distance because in the end was not a big fan. Gallego is going to be a really good lesson to his party about how it is you can run a race in a battleground state, how you run a race that wins Latino male support.
Yeah.
A lot of what he was doing in the last few weeks, the Harris campaign bandwagoned onto. And when they were trying to tell them, you should have been doing this from the beginning. Rodeos, soccer matches.
And, you know, we should check in now with Chris Van Cleve because he is in Phoenix, Arizona, with an update. Good evening, Chris.
Well, Nora, if I can build on something Margaret was saying, we were talking to the David Schweikert campaign. He is a conservative Republican. He is pro-life and was just hammered on the abortion issue for weeks on end in attack ads. I asked them about this issue. Were they worried about losing pro-choice Republicans? And his team said no. They felt like having abortion on the ballot allowed pro-choice Republicans to vote their conscience and then vote their party. And that may be playing out here as we get more of the votes. Now, so many people vote by mail in Arizona that while we will get the total number of people who voted at the polls today in Maricopa County, for example, we understand it's about 250,000. There are hundreds of thousands of uncounted mail-in ballots, many of which were dropped off today at the polls. That's going to take several days to go through the signature verification process, to check the ballots. It also taking a little bit longer than it has in years past because in most counties it's a 2-page ballot, not a 1-page ballot. So you multiply that times hundreds of thousands of ballots, it slows the process down a little bit. So any of these races that are particularly close here could take days, if not 10 to 13 days even, to know who won, to have all of those votes counted.
Chris Van Cleve, thank you. Let's check in with correspondent Lilia Luciano. She is in Las Vegas, Nevada. Good evening, Lilia.
Good evening, Nora. Here in Nevada, what just ended was a big celebration. We are at a viewing party for the Republican Party, for the Trump campaign. I've been hearing from voters for many days now that the issues that really affect them are all economic related. Although there is a ballot question on the ballot here that so far has more than 60% of the vote to enshrine the right to abortion. I've heard from women on both sides who are voting on those issues. One tonight told me that it's the conservative values, although she is a Latina, she is a woman, that is the conservative values of the Republican Party of former President Trump, what drove her to the polls. We've also heard from immigrants who became citizens and have told me they voted for Trump because they believe in his harsher policies at the border. But the things that we heard the most about are the price of groceries. Here, it's one of the places where the groceries are the most expensive, with the fastest rising rents and with the highest unemployment in the country. And what we're seeing right now, of course, this race hasn't been called. There's many more votes that will be counted over here until Saturday. Mail-in ballots that come in before Election Day, or rather that come in before Saturday, will still be counted as long as they're postmarked by today, by Election Day. There's also many votes that have to go through a curing process, and that could take all the way to November 12th. But from the numbers that we're seeing, a very surprising race is that of Sam Brown, who still has a chance to unseat Senator Jackie Rosen, the incumbent. What he told me, he's a Purple Heart recipient, is that he's an outsider, that he's an everyday man, that he and his wife are veterans, and that they don't always necessarily align with former President Trump. In fact, he got Trump's endorsement pretty late in the race, but that he hopes to represent, if he does win that Senate seat, the every person here in the state of Nevada. This party was very lively up until just a few minutes ago. The music came down, but I'll tell you that there's a great deal of enthusiasm from Republican voters here at this Trump campaign party.
Lilia Luciano in Las Vegas for us tonight. Thank you, Lilia. I also want to bring in David Becker, our CBS News election law contributor. And David, what do you expect in the days ahead?
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on that reporting from Lilia and Chris. In Arizona, we're hearing from Maricopa County that there's likely somewhere in the range of, say, 650,000, 800,000 ballots that are still being processed and counted. That's going to take days to do. So there might be some margins there that can be made up. And then in Nevada, as Lilia reported, there's mail ballots that came in today. Those still need to be processed. There's these around 30,000, give or take, mail ballots that had a problem with them and still could be cured. They have up until November 12th. There's the mail ballots that could still come in up through and including Saturday. So depending on how narrow the margins are, we might be waiting for a few days in the state of Nevada and obviously in the state of Arizona as well.
All right, David Becker, thank you. All right, CBS News, America Decides Election 2024. We'll be right back.